comment so that you can feature me.
Oh, you're coming on though, right?
Yeah, well, we're live now. Yeah, so I'll be talking with you on Tuesday, right? Whatever we want to talk about. We're just kind of doing a do-si-do, right? I'll go on your show, you go on our show. Yeah. But yeah, we're live, just so you know. I was just telling Chris, for our listeners, that I like to hop onto his morning show at 10 a.m. Eastern. It's like it's essentially every day, right? Every weekday.
Every morning, yeah.
Every morning. And, you know, I think I've told people this before. I don't know if you've seen this when I mentioned you before on our show, but the first time that I saw people being featured at the bottom of a live stream was on yours. And I was like, whoa, what software is he using? And that kind of pushed us to get StreamYard. And, you know, I was really excited to hop onto yours just so that I could be, featured at the bottom.
Get your picture on there.
Yeah.
So I always remind our viewers that, you know, look, if you comment, we'll be able to see everything that you're commenting, and we can feature you at the bottom of the screen as long as it's, you know, not too far out, you know. Explicit language. If it's like damn or something, that's okay. But you know, I think that's a plus. Right? I think that's a plus of StreamYard, right? That we can interact with others and people can have their voices heard. So make sure you're commenting, interacting. This is Chris Stewart. Matthew's going to get into a formal introduction, but I think we have a ton of fun things to talk about. Chris Stewart is at Citizen Stewart on Twitter. So if you're not following him there already, make sure you're already doing so. We have our Twitter handles below each of our names. But, you know, Chris really brings the fire on social media. And he kind of got me into, you know, realizing the importance of Twitter and using social media to discuss good ideas. So, yeah, with that, I think we have a good amount of people that have hopped on already. Matthew, you want to get into formal introductions, and then we can then we can talk.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Matthew Nielsen. I'm the board chair. By the way, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm Matthew Nielsen. I'm the board chair at the Educational Freedom Institute. We've got Corey DeAngelis, as always, the executive director at EFI. He's also the director of school choice at the Reason Foundation and an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. Our special guest today is Chris Stewart, and he is a former elected school board member, the CEO of the Brightbeam Network, and a renowned school choice advocate. So thanks for joining us today, Chris. Appreciate it.
I'm excited. I'm happy I finally got the invitation, man. It's taken so long.
Hey, Chris, was the first time we met in person the Journal of School Choice Conference this year? Or did we meet at AFC before that? I think we might have met at AFC Chicago.
We did meet at AFC. It was briefly. It was very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, we got to talk a little longer in Florida.
Yeah, but online, I mean, we've been in each other's feeds constantly.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so I know, Matthew, you were about to ask the first question, so sorry for butting in, but yeah, Chris, could you tell us a little bit about your background in the education choice movement, or just education in general? What got you interested, and just a little bit of a background?
Yeah, so I mean, I came to this the way that a lot of people do. I was a parent, and I had issues. So I had issues with the schools. I felt really insignificant in my ability to be able to take challenges and deal with the issues that we had in the schools. And I didn't feel well prepared. I just, everything about school was a mystery to me. Some of the stuff made no sense. A lot of it, when I would get there and I would like dig in on things, I would be like, this can't be true. I mean, we faced a couple of issues early on where I literally had to call multiple attorneys and be like, they can't really do this, can they? And the answer in all the cases was yes, they really can do many of the things we were having problems with. And though I hadn't had a great education myself, I tell people this all the time. I had a poor education myself. I excelled at learning, but did not excel at school. I was very cynical about school. When I became a dad, like, I was not thinking that the schools were going to help us. I was thinking that my kid was going to get an education in spite of the schools. And that came true in some places, right? And about middle school, we needed another option. We were just out of options. The next school that my son was supposed to go to was so bad and renowned for being bad that a person that I knew very closely at the time, who was an educator and a teacher in the district, said, I would never send my kid to that school. There's no way in hell you should send your kid to that school. I thought, well, that's interesting because that's where we're already assigned. Like, we're there already. We're enrolled. What are you talking about? So I actually looked for other options in the district and just couldn't find anything. There was a magnet school in the middle of the city that everybody was going to. So all of my son's friends who had resources and were, somewhat kind of educated and wealthy were either going to go to that school or they were going to go private. So we went to that magnet school in the center of St. Paul, Minneapolis. My son and his best friend, who was white, went at the exact same time, and they put their applications in at the same time. And my son was number 45 on the waiting list, and his friend was like between 2 and 5 on the waiting list, right?
How did that happen?
Yeah, it was kind of like weird. It was like, wow, okay, so something is weird here in how you do magnet school enrollment, because we should be much higher on that list or whatever. Turns out that they have a way of calculating who should get in or not that they're not honest about, that they don't tell anybody about, that they're not honest about. And we try to fight it a little bit. And I call the state and I call all kinds of other people. I get brushed off everywhere I go. But one of the people that I connected with was in the Office of School Choice at the State Department of Education. And he's like, there's nothing you can do to fight any of that stuff. Just, whatever. But I have a school you might like. And that was my first introduction to a charter school. He sent me to the school. I went to it. It was amazing. It was clean. It was safe, orderly. I walked in and I thought it was a private school. I was like, oh, damn. Okay. Y'all been hiding this from me.
So wait, they had some type of weighted lottery, but they don't like publish,
Yeah. Was it like Connecticut where it was racial? Like they actually had racial quotas?
So in Connecticut, they're out front about the fact that they have racial limits. They're not even quotas, they're limits. So you can't have more than a certain number of Black people. You can have as many white people as you want. You can't have more than a certain percentage of Black people.
It's like an 80% rule in Connecticut. If you had 80% of your students were Black or Hispanic, even if you had 20% of the seats open, that next student, it would be they're not allowed to accept them.
Yeah,
can't
enroll. It started at like 60%, and it went up. They had to go back to the courts to get it raised a couple of times. So it started at something small, like I think 60%. But in Connecticut, what that does is you have a person like LaShawn Robinson, whose kid was on the waiting list for 16 years to get into the magnet schools. 16 years. And 3 of those years, this will be interesting for you guys to know, 3 of those years, he was number 1 on the waiting list and there were seats available. And the only reason he didn't get in was because he was not white.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's in the new millennium, guys.
I mean, that is explicit discrimination on the basis of race, and it seems it is unconstitutional. It's not just that it seems unconstitutional. And I think Pacific Legal Foundation has been doing some great work on this in Connecticut. They have this whole article here. They're fighting in the courts. I think they've won some of the cases. I think there might be some cases still, pending, but I think they've won some of the cases in Connecticut about this because it's
settled, right?
I think they settled in Connecticut, and the settlement to me isn't great. The settlement doesn't knock down the discrimination. It doesn't stop them from, like you just said something that should be unconstitutional. Now I'm a lay person. I'm not an attorney. I'm a lay person, but apparently by law in Connecticut, it is constitutional some kind of way. I thought that was outlawed with Brown. But apparently some kind of way it's perfectly constitutional in Connecticut.
I mean, that should go to the U.S. Supreme Court if the state court strikes it down, right? Because that's explicit discrimination on the basis of race. And I don't know what their workaround was. I haven't read into it that deeply, but what it was originally. That's you're this race, you can't come in. That's about as plain as it gets.
That's not difficult to see what that is.
No. Oh, you're Black, you can't come in. I wonder what that is.
Right. That's not hard.
Call that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's your background. That's how you got in to the education space or being concerned about schools, your eyes, which makes sense, right? Your kids start to change your priorities a little. So that's cool. So Chris, when I shot you an email a few weeks back, I asked you what you wanted to talk about. Do you remember what your reply was?
No, what was my reply? That was so long ago. What did I say?
You said,
what did I say?
Do you want me to say it?
Sure. What did I say?
Okay. So your reply, Chris, was,
yeah.
Let's talk about the Ravitchian movement.
Oh, the Branch Ravitchians. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is that a play on the, that's a new Netflix series.
Waco.
Yeah, Waco.
Yeah. But except for we should call it Wacko because that's closer to home. It's closer to home for the people we're talking about. Yeah, man. I mean, it's a serious problem. The Branch Ravitchian movement in the United States, as characterized by 50,000 educators and badass teachers, a network of retired.
Wait, hold on. Badass teachers.
Yeah, badass teachers. Right.
You got to put that in quotes because they call themselves the badasses. But
no, they're right. They're right because they're as opposed to good ass teachers, right? Yeah. So they're right. I mean, it's truth in advertising, right? Because what we need are good ass teachers, but we got these badass teachers stuff, and there's a lot of them. You know?
But I've joked that they're so badass and hard that they block you right when you disagree with them.
You put up any kind of obstacle or defense.
Okay,
it's over.
Sorry,
fragility is real. Fragility is real in their camp. But no, I mean, listen, we encounter it all the time, but I don't think that anybody ever puts it together for the public to say this is a movement. This isn't like a random thing. You have a pope who is Diane Ravitch. She writes these books and a daily blog that has millions of followers and listeners and readers. And you have a national network of pensionistas who have little to do rather than to sit around and defend their pension online and to beat up on people, to tax our motives for wanting reform, to call us names, to dig through our trash and try and come after us in really kind of pathetic and disgusting ways. And all the while they're saying that they're doing it for the public good. It's the most disgusting and depressing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen you comment about this on Twitter, a couple of times at least. And I've kind of had conversations with you about this before, but what do you think about, like when people don't use their actual names on social media or they don't use their identities and then they just go out and attack and try to libel you, which is essentially, I think what you're talking about is there's people that come out and libel you and they don't really stand behind what they're saying, because if they did, they'd put their names behind it and they'd hold themselves accountable. So what do you think about how that plays a role in this? Do you think Twitter should change any of the rules around that? Or
I think if Twitter wanted to be better, yes. Like if Twitter wanted to be better for public discourse and for the safety of competent people who want to have intellectual discussions on their own accord, then they would stop people from doing that. They would stop people. I can't tell you, if I were to go in right now and look, I can't even remember what I've lost count of the number of blocked accounts that I have right now. And these are accounts that are solely for the purpose, 100% of the purpose. If you look at their timeline and their thread and their number of friends and how they were started and what they care about, these accounts are 100% nuisance accounts. They have no other purpose, right? They have no other purpose but to attack people. And they get away with it because they're anonymous.
People you've blocked, not that have blocked you.
Yeah, people I've blocked because, I mean, I had one person that eventually, Corey, became your problem, but it's a teacher in Rhode Island who we all know.
Well, she's not a teacher anymore. She's not a teacher anymore.
She will be soon because she's lost like 5 jobs in the time that she's been harassing me. She's been in multiple districts. I sent stuff to 2 of her superintendents. Right. Whoa. And two of the times. And she gets rehired again. That's the amazing thing. She's been in Oklahoma. She's been in Rhode Island. She's had multiple jobs. But I eventually busted her creating new accounts. Every time I would block one account, she would create a brand new one and show up right again.
I mean, Carrie Rodriguez, the president of the National Parents Union, wrote a whole, edu-drama blog about this. This was in 2017. And I think this led to a resignation for this person we're talking about, who creates quote unquote anonymous accounts, but every time we can figure out who she is. And then she, most recently she's gone after Erica Sanzi, me, other school choice advocates. And most recently she called in her most recent, and this is what ultimately led to her latest dismiss, or it's on the record as a resignation, but
Wow.
she called for someone to cough with COVID-19 to cough on Donald Trump.
Yeah,
and of course, she's
Yeah.
kind of saying it in a joking way, but it led to a big pushback, and then people started looking into her other tweets. It turned out, I think you just had Sharif. Is that his name? Sharif? Is that how you say it? On your show this morning, and she said something like, racist to him in the past, and people.
She's called me all kinds of racial slurs, like
So-
the most ridiculous slurs. So
I think that led to some discussions perhaps with their HR department, which the resignation just came out pretty recently. But look, you've talked about how you block a lot of these people. I block some of these people too. But like when I first started Twitter, it was almost like a badge of honor for me to not want to block someone. And if someone else blocked me, I thought of it as a badge of honor. But I think it's a little more nuanced than that, because like at first I wouldn't want to block anyone. But I think the nuance is you don't want to block people if they actually have an identity behind them. Whereas if it's just some random anonymous troll trying to libel you without any accountability whatsoever, then of course, there's no other recourse essentially than to block them. But we have. You talked about the branch Ravitchians and the Ravitchian movement. I think all of us on here have been blocked by the leader of their movement, Diane Ravitch. We're not random Twitter accounts. We're people who have our identities behind us. We've. Do you recall, Chris, when you were first blocked by Diane Ravitch? Do you have a reason why? Were you libeling her, or?
I can't remember why it was, but I do remember thinking, wow, that's like a little bit fragile. I can't remember what exactly it was, but it was, to me, it was inconceivable that I would be blocked for whatever it was at the time. But I have written about her, like going back to 2013 or 12, I've written about her. So,
but thin skin, right? That was
thin skin, incredibly thin skin. She can breathe fire on anybody, and the moment that they breathe a little bit of it back to her, it's like, oh my God, clutching the pearls. I can't believe that you said that.
Well, I think she has a lot of followers too. I tried to look up, the time that she blocked me. I'm trying to do it as I'm talking, which is why I'm stumbling. But I remember precisely why she blocked me. We were talking about the evidence on school choice, which is like how I got into this movement. My whole thing was, let's talk about the evidence and what the rigorous studies say. They happen to be in favor of school choice. But, to me, that doesn't even really matter. Our parental rights to choose schools are not granted by science. They're not granted by, we shouldn't have to get permission from academic experts to be able to choose schools for our own kids. But that aside, she was misrepresenting like the Indiana study and like the Louisiana evidence, and she was cherry picking studies. And I was just presenting all of the studies. Here are all the studies. You did, here's Louisiana. It was negative, but she blocked me for that. And it wasn't like I was attacking her character. It wasn't like legitimate grounds for blocking someone, in my view.
Well, she stopped being a scholar a long time ago. Here's some things just to be upfront about with Diane Ravitch. She has already told you that 90% of her life scholarship was wrong. Let's just start with that.
Go over that for our listeners, because we all know what you're talking about.
So Diane Ravitch, for years, since the 70s, Diane Ravitch has written and published. Her very first thing that she published was a broadside against liberal and progressive historians, and ever since, she has written one broadside after another. But for years, she wrote broadsides on the side of a more conservative bent, and she wrote thick and well resourced histories of education, like the education of New York, the educational history of New York, and educational fads that came in and went. They were all very deep and dense and well researched, and her writing was good and lucid. And somewhere at the turn, about 2000 or so, things started to change, but definitely by about 2003, 4, 5, 6, right in there, she had become opposed to everything she had previously stood for: choice, charter schools. She had said things in the past like, why should a parent have to sit around and wait for us to prove to schools for their kids when we wouldn't do that with our own kids? Now she has a completely different opinion. But when she switched She slowly became less and less scholarly and more a polemicist, to the point now where she's a former historian. She's a full-time polemicist. If you read her stuff every day, it's so juvenile and childish that she's reduced herself to name calling constantly. She doesn't like call people by their names anymore. She says things like the Billionaires Boys Club.
Yeah.
If anybody ever called her a girl, there would be a problem. But there's no problem with calling grown-ass men a bunch of boys who don't know what they're talking about, which, by the way, has always been her MO. She's been using that boys club thing since the 70s when she first wrote back then. So she's always had this issue with men in that way. But here's the thing. People still take her as a scholar. And not just a scholar, they don't understand scholarship because she's a historian, but she's talking as if she's a psychometrician sometimes, or if she's an educator at other times, or a pedagogue. And she's not. She was a historian. How can she argue with economists? How can she argue with Eric?
She gets into the bell curve a lot, and when she's talking about standardized testing, and I actually kind of agree with Diane Ravitch on the value of standardized tests.
I think you're weird about this. I've seen this in you, Corey.
And so I think she's actually written about how oh wow, I agree with Jay Green, someone who I disagree with on everything about the value of standardized test scores. But what's irritating to me is that she'll say that in the same essay, and I'll pull up an essay from a couple weeks ago in Education Week. She'll say that. Couple of paragraphs later, she'll say, well, charter schools are a failure because some of them get low test scores. Voucher programs have been a failure, not because they get lower test scores, but because they don't increase test scores by enough for a fraction of the cost. They don't increase test scores enough. Vouchers are a failure. People shouldn't be able to pick their schools. So, I mean, that's within the same essay, she'll contradict herself with these kinds of things. Like with you and I mean, we can talk about the merits of standardized testing, but I don't think, Chris, you think that, government should be able to say, well, you pick this school that has an average test score that's here, you can't go there anymore. Unless I'm wrong. Maybe you think there's some,
No, I think it's always going to be I'm a parent, I'm sovereign. So it's always going to be my decision where my kid goes. And if government gets in the way with that, we'll have a fight. So it'll be a long time engagement. It'll be some Braveheart type stuff, right? So let's do it. But I do believe that if you're going to get $700 billion a year, I don't think that it should be, here's the money, all strings, no strings attached. Just go and do whatever you want. Performance doesn't matter. Outcomes don't matter. Just take the $700 billion and run. And I think conservatives used to be better on this, but I think what happened, to be very honest with you, is there's a lot of Republican superintendents in this country. All of that red stuff you see across the country, there's school districts there. And all of those people are superintendents. And they went to people like my guy here, who was part of ESSA, and said to him, man, just get the feds off our back. We don't need to be accountable for no outcomes. It was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that, because previously the line had been, we don't just give money to government schools and have no expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I totally understand that argument. I think that kind of, we can agree there in that, if you don't have any bottom up accountability, if people can't vote with their feet, and they're just residentially assigned to the school, and they have to pay for it through their property taxes, whether they go or not, and there's no bottom-up accountability, we got to have something, right? So at least we have, then there's perhaps a value in standardized tests, but I think where I come in and I argue, and I think you agree with this, is that we don't have to rely as much on top-down accountability if we have that bottom-up organic accountability from individuals. But I was about to bring up a quote or something that Erica Sanzi said, but I want to, before we pivot there, here's that article I was talking about by Diane Ravitch, just a week. It's kind of small, but I'll read it out loud for the listeners. Here's that essay in Education Week from Diane Ravitch, and she says the coronavirus just might end school privatization nonsense, and she uses this as an attack piece against school choice. I got two corrections on it. You can barely see it in the corner over here, but I got two things correct. It looks like it's part of the ad. That doesn't seem like true journalistic accountability here, but anyway, I got them corrected at least. They got the leader corrected of the Ravitchian movement. But she goes in this same essay and attacks standardized tests. Here she says, standardized tests are normed on a bell curve, which ensures we'll always see poor performers, yada, yada. The top half is dominated by advantage kid. Standardized tests are just correlated with income and education. And she does this everywhere, right? She rails against standardized testing. I think everybody kind of knows this. People are fighting against the misuse and overuse of standardized tests is what she argues. But then somewhere else, in her essay, she goes and says, well, charter schools and vouchers divert, funds from public schools. And then, somewhere in here, she says that, some charter schools are, below average, or, they're at the bottom of the ranking systems, and some voucher. And, this is where I got a correction. She said that the DC evaluation had negative effects on test scores, which the most recent years showed no effects on math or reading test scores. Positive effects on safety, positive effects on satisfaction, positive effects on attendance at a third of the cost. And she said that was a negative result somehow. And so we got that corrected. But I just wanted to show that as an example to where she'll argue with herself essentially in the same essay. But
she doesn't have to be consistent, though. She really doesn't. The people who follow her don't care about whether she's consistent or not. It's blind loyalty to a person who's saying what they want to hear. They want to hear. They want to hear that I'm a teacher. I'm amazing. Yep. My unions are amazing. Everything we do is amazing. Nothing is our fault. Nothing we've ever done can be pinned on us. We are like normal people, except for we're not accountable for anything, in life ever. And as long as she says that, her shtick will work. She will do well. She will have lots of speeches to give.
Yeah, I think her place now is kind of, just mobilizing the teachers union, supporting type. And I'm not sure how many people are taking the scholarship as seriously. But, Erica Sanzi, we both really like Erica. So I'm going to show one of her comments. She points out that, Ravitch opted out of the public system for her own kids, sent them to private school. Her grandkids went to private school. But then, now she doesn't want low-income individuals to be able to exercise that same choice for their own children. What is your take on that, Chris? I know you know our take on it.
Well, I don't think somebody should be able to go to a New York private school unless they marry well. That's what I think about it, right? I think everybody else is kind of on their own. You should have to go to the schools that the real people don't have to go to, right? The people with resources. The bottom line is in the choice people. You do a really good job of this, Corey, like pointing out the consistent hypocrisy of people who tell you how great public schools are, but not for their kids, right? Constantly. Right. It's a cliche by now, right?
It is. And when I first started looking into this, it all started with Elizabeth Warren, right? I was super surprised as to how many people, like a success rate, I guess, once I looked into it. Oh, well, there you go. There's another one. I tweet about it. And then, so that's what led to our school choice hypocrisy map at the Educational Freedom Institute, actually, that there were just so many. And people were like, are you keeping track of a list of these people? And, the school choice hypocrites. And, it turned out that was actually a good idea, to actually start a list. And so we have this map online. And, what you just pointed out reminded me of, there's actually someone in Nebraska who was the head of an organization. I don't know which person, this one. She was the head of an organization called, I love public schools or something.
Yeah.
And on Twitter, I just pointed out, well, if you love public schools so much, then why do you send your own kids to the private schools?
Right.
So
I'm glad you bring up Nebraska, because let me point out another hypocrisy. Diane Ravitch's group, the Network for Public Education, likes to call us all like tools of the billionaires. They love to call us tools of the billionaires. Now, her organization, the seed money for her organization came from Warren Buffett's daughter. So last time I checked, Warren Buffett and his daughter are not poor. They
fit that description, right?
Really? Yeah, they don't have an insignificant amount of money. But somehow, it's a problem when you take billionaire money, except for when they do it, right? And all their friends and their allies and their buddies. don't look to them for consistency ever. Just know that they're 100% about a political mission.
Well, I mean, I just brought up Elizabeth Warren. I mean, you remember when Sarah Carpenter's stuff went viral, right? The Powerful Parent Network in Atlanta. And yeah, why don't you tell us about what the reaction was by a lot of the the journalists? Like, what was everybody's gut reaction when they saw in Atlanta there were these moms and families protesting at a Warren rally?
It was a really gross, progressive, elitist thing that happens all the time. They love you when you're a person of color and you are out there, with signs and bullhorns and saying the right thing to them. But when you say the wrong thing, suddenly you become criticized for being a tool. You are like, somebody must have put these words in your mouth. You must have heard somebody say this. So when Sarah and her crew, the Powerful Parent Network, who raised money online to be able to afford the buses to go to that convention, when they confronted Elizabeth Warren, the very first thing that the journalists who were there put up was how they were Walton funded and they were, tools of the billionaires and blah, completely took away all their agency. They have no agency. They're just puppets.
They were just puppets.
They were just puppets.
Yeah, they're not taking this bus ride all the way to Atlanta, because they care about education. It's instead, they're being used essentially. They can't think for themselves. It's totally disgusting and ridiculous. And I mean, you're right that when there's everybody's funded in some way, right? Like you got to be able to afford to do events and stuff, right? But when it's stuff that they don't agree with, they'll just say it's all fake. And that kind of reminds me, I saw you got into a spat with someone. I don't remember what the organization was, but he called you like something pretty racist.
You're talking about my friend Tom, who called me an Uncle Tom.
Yep, here it is. Yeah.
Who, by the way, actually, she refused to take down his comment on her website.
Oh yeah, that was at the Ravitch website, wasn't it?
I asked her because she's how I found out about it. She actually blogged out his blog post, and then when he sent it out, he put, and this is for Uncle Tom, Chris Stewart, or something like that. And then I put note on her. I put a comment on her website on her blog saying, you should pull that down. That's actually inappropriate. To which he came on and doubled down on the comment. It was kind of like, yeah, but you are an Uncle Tom. And
she defends it.
And she actually said, well, I don't clear everything that's on my website, blah, blah. Well, it's not my responsibility.
You should. It's your website. It's DeAngelis.whatever. And
let me tell you something. If Eva Moskowitz called anybody an Uncle Tom, do you know how fast Diane Ravitch would be running to her keyboard so that she could tweet it out and that she could make big hay of it and tell all her listeners how racist Eva would be in that circumstance, in that case?
Yeah,
no question.
But since it's on her side,
here's the tweet you're talking about.
Here's a tweet. There it is. Look at Corey with the forensics.
I'm quick, man. Quick. It's because I tweet about everything. Everything I talk about in here, I tweet about. So I can just do a quick Twitter search to add DeAngelis Corey, and then if I type in these words, it'll come up. But I quote tweeted this guy a few times because this is, and how is he still not deleted this? Like what? Like he
doubled down on it.
Look at how people are replying to it, and rightly so. It's just, man, like. And she
has given him a platform since. Again, she just a couple of days ago, she's given him a platform. Now we know how it is when we give a platform to somebody that they don't like. Like when we give a platform to somebody they don't like, they come at us just guns blaring. We're awful people. Can't believe you gave somebody. But meanwhile, she's got this dude on her platform who's calling me an Uncle Tom. First of all, it's so wrong about that. Just to be honest with you guys, is that he doesn't understand the history of what Uncle Tom actually was. Uncle Tom was actually a radical, and he doesn't know that. So that a person who teaches children every day, and by the way, is a social studies teacher and a math teacher, doesn't understand some of the basics of what he's saying, should worry you about who's in the classrooms with our kids.
Yeah, no question. So real quick, I just want to be clear here. I heard Charles Cole on your show on Eight Black Hands maybe 4 or 5 months ago. You guys were talking about the same thing being funded by billionaires, right? And he made the comment. He said, "Look, I haven't got any billionaires lining up on my doorstep to give me money, but if they were standing on my front porch, I wouldn't turn them away.
Damn right.
And so I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
I'm right behind Charles in line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting. Line up the billionaires.
Yeah. Listen, show me somebody who in one way, shape, or form doesn't work for a billionaire somewhere. Like Nicole Hannah-Jones and I went back and forth once about this after the AP wrote a story basically saying all of us Black people in ed reform were Walton funded and we're a bunch of puppets. The AP actually published this story. And I had enough of that. So I drew a map of all of them on their side that are being funded by billionaires. Sure. By billionaires, right? I don't think people know this. There's a secret annual left-wing meeting of left-wing billionaires that you have to pay $200,000 a plate just to sit at, right? And I can show you this map of everybody who's there, and they plan out the progressive agenda every year. This is billionaires and millionaires, very few people of color, because this is billionaires and millionaires on the left deciding for the next year everybody in political world who's going to get money from them on the progressive side. So the same people who are writing reports dissing us have their money coming directly from this. It's an astounding list of very wealthy left-wing people, right? Corey, I'm surprised you don't have this already. So I'm going to send this to you.
I know, I do. Yeah. I would like to check it out. I mean, but I usually don't get into the funding stuff, again, because look, everybody's funded. I guess that's why I haven't looked into it much. And I think usually speaking, I know speaking for myself and everyone on this podcast, that the money follows the ideas, not the other way around in general. And like, it's not like, my employers are brainwashing me to say a certain thing, like I had these ideas before I was ever employed with whoever I'm employed with. Right. And I think it's the same way with all of us on this podcast and people in the school choice movement too. I don't know of anybody that if you don't truly believe that children should be able to choose their schools, you're not going to be in the movement because you can get money out saying the opposite, right? So like, why say something that you don't believe?
This is where I think it's important though, Corey, because on our side, we're always termed as being inauthentic, astroturf, fake people, right? That are paid to do what we're doing. On the other side, they get the benefit of being presumed to be grassroots. Like they're perfectly authentic grassroots. They don't get funding from anybody. They're just a bunch of, little nonprofits until you check out where the money really comes from. It's all coming from Ford, Soros, Kellogg. You can just go down the list of all these people. And oh, by the way, the people who founded DreamWorks and the people at the Welch's Grape family and the Tide Center, you just keep going down the list. And you're hitting people who you thought, oh my God, I thought you were a little nonprofit, but actually you're getting money from some pretty big people.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, this whole homeschooling thing blew up pretty recently with Elizabeth Bartholet attacking homeschooling and calling for a presumptive ban. But, and we'll get to Ravitch doing this as well. But, people oppose, I don't know if she said it in her essay, but there were similar essays. Maybe it was on the risk of homeschooling essay. But one of them said that, the pro homeschooling crowd is like so well funded. HSL, and then they point to HSLDA and how they're like so powerful. I mean, maybe they're powerful in that they have good ideas and that they win ideologically, but they have their annual budget's like a fraction, 11 million compared to the NEA's like what 374 billion, 374 billion,
396 million. Yeah.
So it's like like a couple percent. Yeah, and then so Diane Ravitch does the same thing, right? In her latest book. Slaying Goliath, where she makes it look like the sector that has like 2 or 3% of the school age population is Goliath, whereas the unions and the government school monopoly is somehow David. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that like what I just said? It's them pretending to be grassroots and small, fighting the man, and we're all kind of like we're all Walmart employees at a very high level, And, I started this by telling you, listen, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now if I hadn't been a parent that had a problem that I had to figure out. I figured it out. I started showing other people. That's why I'm here. I would love for any of them to have that story. I would love for her to have that story because she doesn't. Now this is really like, let's just be real. This is not a book, right? I mean, we're being very honest. This is not a book, right?
I mean, it's all like conspiracy theories, right? I mean, it's all just, like
it's
these
a weird assortment of them. Yes.
And I do you know the background on like the title? I mean, this came out a little bit, after Rebecca Friedrich's book, which was taking on Goliath, when she was saying that Goliath was the unions, and I think rightly so. In Rebecca's case, I think Diane might have saw that and intentionally.
It seems like
it came out pretty closely after and pretty much flipped it around, but it just doesn't make any sense. Like,
how are you going to say dramatic her language is? Like, her other book was the death and life of the public school, and this one is slaying. Like, I'm going to kill. Like, what is up with the language? Like, when did education become less than genteel? Right?
Battle, right?
Yeah, battle. Oh my God, we're battle.
It's a battle to force your kids to go to our schools, to regardless of whether they like them or not.
Let's join the resistance. Let's meet at Starbucks. It's kind of like, wow, really? Okay,
so,
that's
the New York Times actually had a review of slaying Goliath. Did you see it?
Yeah, it was not good.
I'm pulling it up as you're talking about it, but
Robert Pondicio also did a very good review of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Where is the money quote here?
I think it's towards the end, isn't it?
And then Ravitch's thinking took another turn.
Yeah.
They're pretty much saying, Diane Ravitch used to be a little, better with intellectual honesty and stuff. And then they're like, boom, it's all ad hominem. I don't know if they were. Yeah, they did even use the word ad hominem. We now have slaying Goliath, in which Ravitch takes a defiant leap over the line, separating reasoned case building from empty sloganeering and ad hominem attacks. So what a sad state of affairs for intellectual debate. But again, I mean, like we said earlier, I don't know, if this is really meant for intellectual debate or if it's more so just kind of.
It's propaganda. It's something that the followers can use to point to when they get in an argument that, or short one-line quips that they can.
Punchy stuff.
Yep.
Or they feel like they know something that they don't really know. This is what I think is really classist about that is any group of people that is in the underclass or middle class that gets out there and protests anything or has any look to them that isn't perfectly educated by the middle class's take on it gets talked about as if they're just nimcompoos and they're just followers, sheep, that whole thing. But the people who bought that book are college educated. That book is one long string of non sequiturs and ad hominem and what she just called it, sloganeering. That book is actually for educated dummies, right? So, but It's a bestseller. It's a bestseller. Someone at a wine and cheese party is going to say something to you that comes out of that book, and they're not going to have any irony about the fact that they sound stupid.
Well, right? Or they'll say like the one-liner, and then when you push them on it, that's kind of the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
then you're an ideologue.
If you push back on it, you must just be one of these evil people that she's talking about. I see this on Twitter all the time, and I'm sure you guys see it too. That it seems to be that way. A lot of people will just repeat the union talking point, like public funding should be for public schools. And then when you push back and be like, well, do you think people should have to spend their publicly funded Pell Grants at, public university or their residentially assigned community college? Or should people have to spend their food stamps, which are public dollars, at government run, residentially assigned grocery stores? They kind of stop there, right? And they just kind of pivot to something else. And I don't know.
Yeah. They can't follow it along because it's not logical, so it doesn't apply to anything else. Pre-K, food stamps, Pell Grants, nope, it doesn't work outside of.
Use it elsewhere else. Yeah, so it's like, do you think we should do that with all these other programs? No.
This is what you should do, Corey. You should find some enterprising politician in some state who wants to write legislation and call it anti-privatization legislation to take away the Pell Grant, the Section 8, because we can't privatize housing. It's a public good. It's a public good. So we should not privatize it.
And public funds should go to public
They should go to public housing.
Public
Dollars should be for public housing, not for people to get like some privately owned house somewhere. So let's just write a bill. Let's write an anti-privatization bill and see how far it goes with progressives.
That would be fun.
We can't.
It would be fun, wouldn't it?
It would.
Can't have any private toll roads or anything either, right?
No private roads.
No private grocery stores. You can only have, soup kitchens. You can't have, food stamps. You got to force everybody to go to the soup kitchen instead.
Yeah, no grocery stores. You can. I could think of a couple states where you could find a person or two that would take that on.
We should do it. This is like one of 8 bills I think we should write just to put liberals on the hook. Put them on the hook for going all the way with your values. Let's go all the way with your values, right?
I love it.
Because why stop at schools? Really?
Education's different. Education's different.
Different than housing and food?
Yeah, I mean those.
Hell, last time I checked, you need food and housing more than you need like a school, right? So, come on. You've done a very good job of this, and actually, I've tested it so often too about the public good thing. There are other things that feel like more of a public good than education that they're not demanding all public dollars go to something public, right? That's my only point. Is it's really not a public good. We know that for a fact.
Not. It's
just not.
It's factually not. They think it's out. They think they confuse public good, which means non-excludable and non-rivalrous.
Right.
Schooling fails both of those because you can exclude people from benefiting from the service. Obviously, private schools exist. They close their doors. So it's excludable, and it's rivalrous in that if I take a seat, I take up your ability to take up that seat. So it fails both conditions.
That's just some esoteric economist definition of public good. You know what I mean, Corey.
Well, what they mean is that it's good for the public.
It's good for the public,
and to which it's not. What's actually good for the public is the kid getting a good education, and the best way to do that is allow them to choose the school.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you buy that argument that it's, I would say a lot of it's bad for the public if, there's a lot of bullying or fighting going on, if you're in a dangerous school, if your teachers are just showing kids videos every day and they're not actually teaching, it might be a public bad, if anything. But look, if we can all agree that a good education, could benefit the public, right? So why not let people do that? Why not let people choose?
I'm going to think that you have really low and bad standards if you keep telling me that something is the cornerstone of democracy and a public good that gets the results that we get. If it is so damn good for the public, why are we graduating so many people incapable of doing anything productive in the American economy?
No, it's amazing, but just don't look at the NAEP. But
right.
Yeah, don't look at the NAEP. But because if you do, you'll just get more depressed. But public schools really are good, and you know what it is? It's funding. They need more money.
Smaller class sizes, funding. Get the politicians out of the classroom. Get the parents out of the classroom. Give us better kids. Fix their home lives. Here's my favorite part. You really could fix public education if you can transfer the entire American economy to a socialist economy. Then we could have good schools. And that's going to happen soon. So let's stop all this reform stuff, right?
Right.
In reform, because it's going to happen soon.
The whole argument for public schools or government schools and compulsory education laws, at least in the United States and elsewhere, was to have a well-educated citizenry and to have, democratic citizens. There were other arguments too, don't get me wrong, about, making those immigrants be more American, whatever.
American,
yes. And we want everybody to be more Protestant. We don't want those Catholics bringing their views over here. But besides that, the other rhetoric by Horace Mann and others was about democratic citizens. Well, here you go. The latest NAEP scores came out a couple weeks ago. U.S. history, 15% proficiency rate. Civics and geography, 3 out of every 4 kids are not proficient in these. So the very argument for compulsory schooling in the first place just doesn't hold water when you look at the actual data.
I hadn't seen that before too, and that's just outlandish.
Just came out.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's real crazy. But if you were to address it again, that would be because we don't have enough money in the system.
Right. They need more money.
We need more money. We need more teachers because we don't have enough teachers right now, and we don't have enough counselors and staff. Even though the ratio of staff to student Corey, you've said this before. What was your chart say? Like
ballooned. It's ballooned over the
crazy
past,
thing.
Whatever years. I did a little bar chart race. You show over time, and
92.
It was
Ben
like
Scafferty.
It went up.
No, it was like 60 to 80% increase over the last couple of decades, whereas like spending increased like by 30%, and teaching, teachers have increased by like 30% too, I think. But the main takeaway, the main takeaway is that in the last couple of years, for the first time in the U.S., we now have more support staff than we have actual teachers in the system. It's a jobs program. We have like 3.2 million teachers, but we have more than 3.2 million support staff for around 6.5 million employees in the government school system.
Can we talk about something nobody's willing to talk about?
Let's do it.
So someone here put here, we need more good teachers with exclamation point, right? So people like to point to Finland, and I think it was the first person I saw point this out was Kathleen Porter McGee, who wrote something years ago about this. But when Finland decided, everybody's favorite Finland decided to change things, they shut down their schools of education because they were trash. And they reconstructed them and had fewer of them. And then they put a very high bar for who can get into that program. In the United States, we do exactly the opposite, and we never talk about it. We have too many college of education schools that are basically catch-alls for people that don't do well in other programs. And they're money makers because they're big funnels. They have wide open funnels. If you don't get into engineering, you're always welcome to teach Americans' children. Now, here's the part that I'm going to say that nobody wants to talk about, and this bears out in the facts. Get mad at me if you want, but the bottom line is we draw our teachers from the bottom of the cognitive collegiate pool in the United States, right? And that's a problem if you're talking about taking people at the bottom of the cognitive pool in college, putting them through poor programs and poor training, and then putting them in classroom and giving them lifelong protection.
Embalming research.
Lifelong protection.
Yeah. There's research on this, Chris. You've seen this, right. I'm sure.
Research, yes.
Go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to say, I might even try to find it here real quick, but there was recent, well, I don't know if it was recent. What was it? Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. It was after 2010. This research came out, and you're not wrong, right? I mean, that most of America's teachers come from the bottom third of those, and the way that they test that, you could,
it's like like standardized test scores and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, you could take issue with that and say, "Oh, it's
but
not
from the evidence
accurate."
we have, it seems like the lower performers of the that spectrum. But of course, none of us here are saying that all teachers that go into the system are incompetent or anything like that. We're saying that just on average, that's what the data bear out. And I think what's also even more importantly is that everybody pretty much gets a trophy. And that the latest evidence on this shows that less than 1% of teachers are rated as unsatisfactory, and over 99% are rated as being satisfactory. So no matter how well or poorly you do, you get paid the same. You don't get ranked any differently.
Can I add another wrinkle to this that's terrible too? And I'll look for this to send to you. The federal government did a study and found out that when teachers leave in the first 5 years, it's the teachers with the highest SAT scores that actually leave. So this adds another wrinkle to who stays, right? Like the smarter ones leave because they can, right? They can have another occupation. They can go somewhere else.
Well, and they might be saying, "Look, I'm kicking butt, right? I'm not getting rewarded.
Right.
I'm getting
rewarded.
I'm getting paid less than this person who's just sat around for 20 years." And that doesn't and so you're right. Like, I mean, the incentives to leave, right?
Well, it's demoralizing too, right? It doesn't matter if you're in teaching profession or any other profession. It's demoralizing to be killing it every day and to look next door and say, "Wait, you've got 4 more years doing this, but you suck, and you're making more money just because you decided to hang around longer. This isn't worth it to me. I'm going somewhere else."
Everything we're saying right now, though, feeds into why, when they ask the question, why aren't we respected like other professions? Why do you constantly not treat us like doctors and attorneys and other college-educated people? I always like to point out California and Illinois, for instance, have a 45% pass rate for the bar. And nobody is talking about lowering the bar for the bar, because the first people that will fight you on lowering the bar for the bar are attorneys who have passed the bar. Right. In every state where teachers aren't passing the test that they need to be inducted, they're lowering the standard for them to pass so that they can pass. Right. That's why attorneys and teachers are treated differently. Right. If there was a 45% pass rate that you just stuck with teachers, and you only got the ones who could pass, that would be a different story.
Right.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. What's also interesting is, Erica pointed out that, there seems to be a higher bar in Finland, and maybe that's why, there's more of a professional aura of teachers in Finland, maybe because it's a higher bar. But then also, like when people point to Finland as like, we got to do what Finland, is doing, that's totally a ridiculous line of reasoning. Econometricians would call it selection on the dependent variable. And the problem there is that, you can just look at the type, the thing that you want done and say, I want to do that here. And that's what people do. They say, oh, look, they're getting paid more, we should do that here. But then they ignore the fact that, well, in Finland, they have a national school choice program. How do we know whether it's the higher teacher salaries or maybe it's the school choice program?
Well, say more about this, because you've said this before, but I always hear the opposite about Finland. Like Ravitch and others say they don't have any private schools there. But I've heard you say this before.
They do have private schools, but then also they have, a nationwide system of school choice. So even if you just look at this blog, it says something about, I think only like 3% of the schools are private schools in Finland in the strict sense of the term. But at least, they have a nationwide school choice system where you can pick your schools. They're not just resident.
What is this? Go back. I've never seen
from the World Bank.
But what is this part right here? So they have school budgets depend on enrollment. Finland runs national school choice program or system where parents and students can choose freely between 2,600 municipal and 80 privately managed schools.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's
funding follows the students.
Most of them are.
Website is this? This is propaganda, Corey. This can't be real.
Well, I mean,
what is this?
It's funny. It's funny, isn't it? Because it's like this is the first thing I bring up when people are like, "Oh, we should do what Finland does." It's like, okay, well, I guess we'll have school choice for all, right? Nobody's assigned to your monopoly school. Everybody gets picked. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, never mind. No, we don't want to be like Finland anymore."
Well, and let's point out that Finland has been sliding for 5 years and no one's paid attention.
Yeah, in recent years, yeah. So I think we're talking less about Finland and elevating it less. But and that just goes to show we don't know what's causing the changes in outcomes in Finland.
No.
You can't.
What I always found a little racist. This is what I found a little racist about the Finland thing. First of all, Finland is the size of Minnesota where I live, and almost has the exact same religious and demographic template, right?
Yeah.
So I live in the Finland of America, and we have like very bad outcomes for kids of color. But in all those times that people were pushing on Finland, they were ignoring the fact that Finland sometimes would be number 2 or 3, and Singapore would be number 1, or one of the Asian countries would be number 1, and they never said we should be Singapore, right? And I always wondered why. Well, why would you want to be number 2 or number 3? It seems weird. It's suspicious. It's just, why wouldn't we want to be Singapore? And no one ever bit on the Singapore thing. Their standards are very high in Singapore for students and for teachers. Everybody is on the hook for achievement there.
So we want to do what Finland's doing because they have the reforms that we want to do. We don't want the standards thing. So we're going to point to Singapore. We're going to point to Finland. Ignore the school choice thing. Pretend that doesn't exist, and we'll point to the salaries. And we'll point to a couple other things like
the 4 hours of recess every day and
respect.
That's right.
They respect teachers. Yeah. You got to trust and respect teachers.
I think that's the main reason, but. Could be other reasons too.
I don't think that it's easy to have a conversation like this without genuflecting. I don't mean all teachers. I don't mean, I'm not saying all teachers are bad. I'm not saying we have to do that because there's some sort of emotive, almost juvenile perception that we have of the preciousness of the teacher psyche and who that's supposed to be and all that. We have got to be better within reform of just calling a thing and going full throttle after it and telling the truth and being intellectual people.
Yep.
Right? This whole emotive kind of like heartfelt blah blah blah. No. If you are doing a bad job, you're doing a bad job, right? and someone in your life, because some of you have never been told that in your life. So someone's going to need, and this profession is the most narcissistic one I've ever seen. Out of all the professions, I never heard, it's like being on the worst date ever. Let me talk about me. Me. Right? Yeah. Full time. I'm going to tell you about me. Enough about you. Now let's talk about me again. Right? All the problems are someone else's fault, and all the good stuff is my fault. Right? Like everything. Teachers have it so hard, right? They have such a tough job. Does anybody ever say EMTs have such a tough job? We've got to stop, we got to start saying how tough a job EMTs have, right?
I mean, everybody stop giving them injured people.
Everybody can talk about how their job's super tough.
Everybody can. You know what's really tough? I can tell you what's tough. What's tough is being unemployed with a poor education in the United States, in a capitalist society that values education. That's one of the roughest jobs. So if you're middle class with a college education with full benefits, a pension, and 3 months off every year, I don't think you're a victim. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I just don't think that you're one should cry.
Did you see, we talked about Nebraska a little bit earlier. Did you see what happened in Nebraska? I think the news came out today, but they're giving their superintendents raises right now in Nebraska. Jesus. Check it out. They just approved pay raises. You got this guy, $236,000. Let me say that a little louder. This guy, $240,000. This guy, about $240,000. And, I just commented, meanwhile, people who have to actually, earn their money and in the private sector, and they can't just take it from taxpayers, they're losing their jobs. And, a lot, I don't want these superintendents to lose their jobs either. I don't want anybody to lose their jobs, obviously. But, look at what they're getting paid, and they're having the nerve to, pass taxpayer funded increases when those taxpayers are oftentimes, losing their jobs in times like this. So yeah,
this is poor time. Like
it's just
totally poor timing.
Yeah.
No, it looks horrible. The optics are so bad, but that ain't nothing.
No,
because
Texas is terrible.
Texas
is the worst.
You tweeted about this like a month ago, Corey, or 2 months ago. There's a dude making $600,000. And his entire district, the superintendent in Texas, making over $600,000, and he's got 2,000 kids in the school district.
Only a couple thousand. Yeah, I think you saw it.
Like 2,000 kids.
Yep. And if he was a charter school leader, he would be in Diane Ravage's blog every day.
And show us your private jet
every day. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, though, right? I mean, of course, some private school, leaders and charter school leaders make a good amount of money, but the whole difference in this discussion is about voluntary versus coercive.
Yeah, right.
If you're making a lot of money and you're still kicking butt on academics and people are still banging down your door to get in, and plus, by the way, you're getting, fewer resources per child, in the charter school sector, they get a lot fewer resources than traditional schools, and you're able to pay your leaders more than the nearby government schools. Well, that just tells me that you're really doing a good job, and then that compensation is legitimate. But when you're giving yourself raises when people don't want to be in your school, that
doesn't make sense. And think about what you just said about the Texas guy. He's making $600K, 1,000 kids or more. Eva Moskowitz has 18,000 kids. So do the math. What that would be if you just right-sized his pay to her. What would she be making a year? He's got 1,000 kids. She's got 18,000 kids. Right.
Millions.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would gladly. And what's her proficiency rate? Right. It's in the 90s.
Killing it.
Right. Killing it in the 90s. So I don't want to hear anybody else talk about charter school pay ever again. Right. Because Texas is the reason that we should all be paying attention.
Yeah.
Erica Sanzi says, I'd argue that Eva Moskowitz earns every dime she earns.
Well, exactly. It's voluntary transactions. And I think that's, that's the rub, right? I don't care how much you pay, whoever you pay in your organization, but you have an incentive to spend it well when your customers can leave. And if you don't like that there's a private jet in a particular type of charter school that they're using, vote with your feet elsewhere and take your money with you. The problem
in the government schools,
you can't do that.
I just want to say though, I think private jets are a little gross. I just want to say that, like, I have my limits too. I'm all about the reform, but private, when I have a pastor that's like, God wanted me to have a private jet, and he wanted you to pay for it. I start getting a little shaky on your religion and your theology once I see that. Right? This is like, so we're Lutheran. This is how a pastor is Lutheran. He drives away in a Camry. That's how you have a Lutheran pastor. And these guys are talking about having jets. I'm not for it. So
hey, so we're talking about Texas and we're talking about pastors.
Oh God!
That account for do you know who runs the pastor? There's like they're popping up.
Man,
they have pastors for Oklahoma public.
Yeah. So somebody sent me the person they think is doing the tweeting from that account. I've pushed them on it before because as a Christian, going to a Christian account that they're called Pastors for Texas Children, right? But every tweet that they have sounds like it was written by Diane Ravitch, and it's all about union, and it's all like, render your child to Caesar because that's what the Bible says, right? Like that's I remember that part of the Bible where it said, render your children to Jesus and keep them away from me or any school that teaches them about me. Isn't that what Jesus said in the Bible?
It was right after the parable of the widow's mite. It was right after that. Yeah.
He's like,
we're talking about.
There it is. Right. And they make a moral argument, but not a theological. And I pushed them several times because any Christian that I know should be able to talk theology. We should be able to talk these conversations. We should be able to sidebar, have the exact same conversation we're having right now, but have it be about Christ and have it be about biblical and scriptural basis for our understanding of the issue. They couldn't do that. They could not do that. And I kept asking, I ended up writing a blog post saying, this is what I found in the Bible about education and about children. What are you basing yours on? And they ended the discussion.
That was it.
Had no idea, not an idea. They had no interest in a theological conversation, but they're pastors.
Is this
pastors?
When did you write this? 2019, October?
It probably was last month or last year. Yeah. Probably like fall last year. That's it.
I'm quick, man.
You are very quick. He's like the forensic king.
But yeah, I mean, this seems, why can't they talk about, respond to you in this? I'm
open for that conversation too, as any Christian should be. We should be having these conversations with each other. We should be looking for understanding.
Well, it almost seems like at first I thought it was a parody account because you can't have religion in public schools, right? You can't have a religiously affiliated education in government schools. I'm not going to call them public schools. Sorry for making that mistake. Government schools. And they're arguing that people shouldn't be able to, choose private schools that are religious. I mean, it's just totally bonkers that, we need to, I don't even remember like some of the crazy things they say, but it's just essentially like, oh yeah, God would love us to not be able to worship him in a private school. We need to only go to, non-religious schools. God would want this.
Here's the argument they make that I think it's really interesting. They make an argument that God would favor you for being for the general provision of all and the poor. So that's one argument that they make. Funding. Another argument that they make is the pastor who started this is Baptist, and he uses Catholics as like an example. He says, me being a Baptist and you being a Catholic, you wouldn't want the government, propping up my school, and I wouldn't want the government propping up your understanding of the world. So it's very sectarian in that way, which again, God is all about dividing up his own people in the Bible. Right. It's like I've read that all through the Bible, ye shall be divided and not be brothers and sisters. But that's the argument that they make. We should be for religious liberty by keeping government out of our schools, out of our religious schools. That's not the first time I've heard that either, by the way. I've heard that in some conservatives.
Take them down because that's a bad argument.
It is a bad argument, but you can't really take them down if you can't get them to talk about theology. That's the bottom line. You can't be a pastor without theology. So if you can't talk theology to me, you have ceased being a pastor.
Well, and I mean the whole Blaine amendments in the government school system in the United States was all about anti-Catholic animus and elevating Protestantism over Catholicism. So they kind of are, they're arguing against themselves essentially, and saying that you should be able to provide for the public to get an education. Well, that's funding, right? We can still have funding of education.
Yeah.
People should be able to pick them. They should be able to pick, if I want to go to this Catholic school or this Protestant school or this anti-religious government school, or, I should be able to pick all those things.
Corey, I think you're missing the point, though. The disciples of Jesus were unionized. And it's a little known fact. It's a little known fact. Yeah, it's a little known fact. They were unionized. Yes.
14, 20 years in service. They were on pensions. They were out.
Pensions for life. They were pensions for life, right? Yep. They were living the high life. They were going to casinos and stuff. Yeah, it was like awesome, right? Talk about being ahistorical and a-religious. That's exactly what those accounts are. But Corey, watch out for them. They're growing. They're going in other states. Matthew, you should watch them too. But Corey, you're the slayer. Both of you guys should watch them. But they're going into Kentucky, Florida, and they're already in Oklahoma. So they're expanding.
I saw them in Oklahoma.
Oh, the pastors for Oklahoma kids and all these. Texas is the biggest account, right? But then they're going.
Yeah, but now they're spreading. So they must have gotten a big grant. Somewhere they got a big grant.
Well, did you guys see this article that came out just maybe a week ago? But it was like this Baptist news organization, and all they did was unleash an attack against funding of private schools and school choice. And I don't remember who it's by, but it's just
a very progressive,
completely wrong, like incorrect, factually incorrect.
It's a quasi Baptist group, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, and they're very much like a progressive, again, a progressive front. But they are trying to make inroads with people of faith, because they're trying all avenues. People of faith, people of color. They're even trying to organize the Red for Ed conservatives teachers, the Republican teachers. So,
oh really?
Yeah. Yep.
That one's new.
Yep, it sure is. They're trying to get some of them. They feel like the wins that they've had in West Virginia and Arizona and elsewhere with getting everybody to put on the same T-shirt, no matter who you voted for president, is an opportunity for them. And they feel like, oh, we found our issue, right?
Yeah.
Like pay. All we have to do is say everybody should be paid more. And everybody comes to the table. That's the milkshake that brings the boys to the yard right there. So that is it right there. So
nice.
I love Angela Humphrey says believers are supposed to call out their sisters and brothers in love. So let me say that what I've said today has been mostly in love.
Mostly
in love. Mostly. It has been theoretically in love. Yeah. So.
Well, hey, we've kept you longer than you promised.
Yeah, you're our longest guest so far, Chris. And
awesome.
I feel like we can keep going another freaking 5 hours, even though it's Friday afternoon. But there's so much to talk about with you, and we talk a lot on social media. So it's good to be able to chat with you.
Yeah.
In person, hopefully we see each other in person soon once things reopen at a conference or something. But it's good. It's good to talk.
I'll be like this. I'll be covered. Well, listen, thanks for having me on. I'd love to come back anytime, and you guys are welcome on my broadcast in the morning anytime. And you're coming on anyways, Corey and Matthew. It should be good to have you on at some point. Get you on to my broadcast. And I just want to say this everywhere I go. I want to leave with this, which is we have to be so clear on what our mission is, what our fight is, and stop being so weak and so soft in the middle. And I feel like reform has gotten so distracted and so disjointed and so soft in places that they're having their way with us right now because we're not clear and we're not resolute. I love the way that I see you fight all the time.
We need more. We need more buzz.
You definitely need more people who are willing to take names and kick asses and just keep going with it, because they are savaging us, right? They are having a field day with us.
Well, yeah. Well, we were about to hop off, but now I got to respond. But I've been having the same conversations, right? Like this is exactly right. That I think the school choice movement for a long time has taken the completely wrong approach, and that approach has been, here's these studies, here's these white papers, and I've done a ton of studies myself, right? And I mean, it's important to have that, but there's been a gap in, getting people really excited about school choice and to really see the moral argument for school choice and to see how the huge injustices we have with these other groups pushing and fighting against people to be able to choose their own schools for their kids. and to see the hypocrisy in people that exercise school choice for their own kids and then, push down the rest of society to not allow them to be able to have similar educational options. So I think you're absolutely right, Chris. And this is kind of, what we've been both kind of pushing for on Twitter and elsewhere. And really, I think being at the forefront of this kind of different approach to pushing for school choice. If you're going to make school choice a voting issue, you got to get people to care about it. And you can't just be like, hey, look, the test scores are low over here. That's part of it. But, you're not going to mobilize politically advantaged players and families because they're already in schools that already have high test scores.
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. So,
yeah.
But if you bring up stuff like the political indoctrination going on and just, the
hypocrisy,
the hypocrisy, and then all of the analogies about how this system, how we fund schools doesn't make any sense at all. So, I do think we need more of that. And we still need the white papers and the studies, but school choice is beyond that. I said that earlier, right?
This is what, though, I love about seeing you come to the fight, though. The thing is, I come out and I'm a pugilist, so I just do what I do, right? And I feel like that's my role, to be able to be an activist and block and tackle for the people that are really educating kids so that they don't have to, so that they can do it in peace. But when you come on the scene with actual, no, I'm going to kick your ass and I'm going to bring some studies with me, right? Like this is a double threat now. This is kind of like, I'm not going to take any nonsense from you. I'm going to keep just stating the truth openly and as sharply as I possibly can. And oh, by the way, this is actually what the research says. That's that's an additional superpower.
We don't even need the research, but we got that too.
You have it.
Research is on our side that shows that when people can choose, well, they actually tend to do better, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense logically. It makes sense morally, and and now we have evidence behind that too. So I feel really good about the school choice movement. I mean, look, we're going up against the true Goliath, which is the teachers unions and people who want to protect the status quo government monopoly system. But we are Goliath in the sense that we have the better ideas and we have the evidence on our side. So I feel really good about school choice going forward and educational freedom overall.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I'd love to be as optimistic as you. I'd love to see the fight. The fight's got to happen. It's been 50 years in the making, really, and we haven't won one. I would love to point to a state where we completely won, like where it's just 100%, like it's our state. I'd gladly move there. Anyways, thanks guys so much. I appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much for coming on. Again, we could have talked for forever here.
Forever.
We even started up again after we already said bye. But yeah, I'm happy to be back on it. Yeah. I'm looking forward to being on your show. This coming Tuesday. But yeah, awesome. Talk to you online, and to the listeners, this is Citizen Stewart on Twitter, Chris Stewart. Make sure you go and follow him. But until next time, we'll be talking on here again. Matthew Nielsen and I will have another conversation at the Educational Freedom Institute podcast coming up on Monday. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, everyone.
See you, Chris.